My name is Amy Sawyer. Citation number 1, citation number 2, and then my note card. Today I'd like to talk to you about a very serious subject. Why should you always report domestic violence? One of the main reasons you should always report domestic violence is because it probably affects someone you know. Whether it's a student, a family member, a child, or someone in your community. Furthermore, domestic violence doesn't just affect the victim. It affects the family as a whole. It can affect the workplace and the community. And also, finally, domestic violence, if it's not stopped, will perpetuate and continue. The abused then becomes the abuser. I'd like to take you back in time to January 27th of 2010 in Lake City, Florida. Suddenly you hear screaming cries, blood-curdling cries of a young woman with the words, "Help me." Now, do you report it or do you ignore it? Later, of that specific case here in Lake City, police reports have witnesses stating, and I quote, "Yes, I heard the screams. No, I didn't call because I didn't think it was any of my business." Another witness was quoted as saying, "I heard the screams, but I just thought, what did she do?" The victim. Now, do you report domestic violence? According to domesticviolencestatistics.org, it is noted that every 9 seconds in the United States, a woman is beaten or accosted. And furthermore, 1 out of every 3 women in the entire world have experienced abuse. Now next, we talked about earlier how domestic violence doesn't always just affect the victim. It affects the workplace. 8 million days of work are missed due to domestic violence. That equals 32,000 full-time jobs. That's a lot. Does it affect you now? Do you report domestic violence now? Statistics also show that a child that is in domestic violence, that witnesses it, that becomes part of it, a lot of times becomes the abuser. Are you going to be the one that stops it? Now, do you report domestic violence? Let me take you back in time again to January 27th, 2010. That cold day, that gray day, that awful day. The screams ringing in your ear. That woman was beaten. She was choked. She was spat upon. She was kicked down a flight of steps, left for dead. That woman then gathered up everything within her, got in her car, and what did she do? She reported domestic violence herself. She drove herself in a state, confused state, almost dead, crying, beaten, half dead. She took it within herself and reported that domestic violence. She went to the police station and she told the truth what happened that day. She was 1 out of 3 in the United States that almost was murdered. Those are high statistics. Now, are you going to report domestic violence? Are you going to be the one that reports it? You say you don't know anyone. You're not affected by it. That woman chose to stay in domestic violence. Did she choose? Now are you going to report domestic violence? You say you don't know anyone. You say nobody in your family has ever been abused or beaten. None of that. Well, now you know someone that has been affected by domestic violence. I am that woman that was beaten, that cried out for help. that people ignored. No one called that day. And I could have been that 1 out of 3 that was actually murdered. I lived. And hopefully I lived to perpetuate the cause to report always domestic violence. Are you going to report domestic violence now? Thank you.